Okay, this is video number 38 today. Feeling slightly creative, done quite a few videos today. It's funny, sometimes I can do a whole load of videos and then nothing for ages. But anyway, let's get on with the topic. So, video 38, cults, what not to do. And I've put here, get very angry indeed. Of course, you might be the person that has lost a friend or a family member to a cult. How do you react? Well, we're going to talk about what not to do. You might be a former cult member and you think, well, what am I going to do about these cults? I've done all the wrong things by instinct. And you learn from your mistakes, and I think one of the classic mistakes, and we'll dig into it, is if somebody joins a cult, you're probably going to say, well, you're in a cult and you've been brainwashed, which is true, but the person has been indoctrinated to consider your response as the devil, trying to get them away from the cult, trying to get them to lose their salvation, to turn away from God and to listen to you. And their response might just get you even more worked up. Why are you calling me the devil? I'm not the devil. You know me. You don't know these strange people. They've completely brainwashed you. There's one particular video on YouTube that I will put in the description. It's a sort of documentary done by Rick Alan Ross when he was trying to get somebody out of a cult called the Potter's House. And the parents and the loved ones made all the classic mistakes. And so in desperation they hired a deprogrammer, Rick Alan Ross, and they actually documented the sort of process of deprogramming. Now these days the internet has changed everything. Obviously there are cult members that won't have access to the internet. They'll say the internet is the work of the devil, kind of thing. So you might not be able to reach or help exit counsel people, all the people online. For certain groups, you're going to have to do some old school exit counselling and where did they go? And it depends on the intensity of the group. So the cult that I was a part of from 1995 through to 2015 and its offshoot, London ICOC and London ICC, they're online. They're recruiting people online, they're on TikTok, So the first thing to do if you lose somebody to a cult is, first of all, where are they? Are they safe? They might move in a brother's house or a sister's house, something like that, a sort of cult commune kind of thing. And cults, in many regards, they haven't really changed in thousands of years in some aspects. In other ways, obviously, they use the newer technology or whatever. I mean, what blows my mind is they even advertise on social media. And social media allows adverts from cults. Social media seems to allow adverts from anyone. I'm surprised Iran isn't on social media advertising. Iran is such a wonderful place. It wouldn't surprise me. But getting very angry is a natural response. It's like, what? You might be angry at yourself. How could I allow this to happen? But anger doesn't generally produce the most effective ways of dealing with things. So you've got to dig in and do a little bit of research on how cults work and how cults have worked for thousands of years. You know, it really is. It really is a game of the more you know about cults, the more effective you will be in getting people out of cults. It is a knowledge thing. How they use their devious trickery to get people in the cults. You know, um, I mean, there's so many things you could be angry at. The injustice I've put here, inequality, rich leaders, members slaving away to a god that they can't even prove exists. Yes, it's bonkers. The abuse, all sorts of abuse, exploitation of sincere people. Another classic mistake that people make regarding cults is to, look at the average member and you're part of an evil cult, therefore you're an evil person. Just through association with being in a cult, you are an evil person. No, that's not the case. The leaders maybe definitely are evil, but the regular members are just pawns on the leader's chessboard, and they are the victims. And so you have to be compassionate for people who've ended up in a cult. It was not their fault. First of all, it was not their fault. Secondly, they weren't looking to join a cult, And thirdly, the cults use very devious ways to manipulate people, to use them, to recruit them, to get them into the cult and all of that kind of stuff. It's very devious. And that's what you're up against. You're up against devious people. Now, if you get angry and you get enraged, and see it from the point of view that this is another thing that happens happens often, right? Somebody joins a cult, and then the parent or the friend will sort of, I want to meet your leader. I want to meet your leader, right? And the leader will use what they call gaslighting techniques, make a drama, make a scene, So you go along and you think, in your naive, sincere ignorance, that you can have a conversation with your friend in the presence of a leader and you'll talk them out of the cult. What will probably happen is the cult leader will turn it into a drama, and you'll get enraged. And as you get enraged, you'll look more and more like the devil. Just the horns are missing. They want to alienate people from people. It's like if you walk away from a meeting, let's say you and your friend that's in the cult, you meet the leader, right? And the leader will suss you out. You're either recruitment material or you're the enemy. There's no in between. You cannot be friendly with these cult leaders. You can't be friendly with them. You are either to be recruited or you're the enemy. You're standing in their way. There's nothing in between. Yeah. And it's asking a cult leader questions and expecting to get an honest answer is also rather naive. Well, I heard that you earn all this money and you're in the newspapers for doing this stuff. What have you got to say? And the leader will say, it's all lies. It's all lies. Because they're very good at covering up their sin. Because they have to be very good at covering up their sin. This is the thing. Is there injustice in cults? Absolutely. There's abuse going on. And why would you expect an abusive group to be good judges, if you like the Mormons or Jehovah's Witness, right? So the group that allows abuse isn't going to be the group that sees justice is done, because it's the group that allows abuse. It's these basic little sort of things that you realise. You know, your friend has joined a cult. Cults are a bad thing. Do you honestly think you're going to have a productive conversation with a group that exists through using devious methods? Of course you're not going to have a reasonable conversation with them. And because the group pretends to represent God, it's basically you up against God. You know, so the member will look at you as, oh, you don't understand. You know, the devil's using you. Let me teach you. Let me do the Bible studies with you. And then you'll understand. So they think the cure for you not understanding what they've found in the cult is to brainwash you. This is the sort of logic you're up against with cults. Therefore, I would recommend professional exit counsellors who have done this for decades. You know, and the nice thing about a lot of these people, they do put on social media a lot of videos, a lot of education, a lot of stories with ex-members to show you how the cults do what they do. I got recruited in the mid-90s. There wasn't much internet around warning about cults. There was a little bit, but not very much. So when I got recruited, I knew nothing about cults. I was literally, you know, easy prey, low-hanging fruit, as they say. So I've put here that it's a bit like the masked magician. There's the masked magician is a magician that shows you how they do their tricks, because that's part of what we want, isn't it? How does he do that? You know, and when some of the magicians show you how to do some of the simple tricks, not only do you now know a trick that you can perform on a friend or whatever, you've learnt something. So as well as being entertained by the masked magician, you're being trained to be a magician yourself. All you need is the sort of props. So it's the how do they do that? And how do they do that with magic? How do they do that with cults? How do they do that? Why the hell did people vote for Trump? You know, it's all about technique. And of course, the con artist or the scammer or the dodgy tradesman or whatever, they've learned their tricks, the tricks of the trade. And that's how they survive. People survive by conning other people in some cases. And that's what you're up against. You can't be delusional about it. You can't think, oh, the government's going to help. Because there's plenty of cults around for thousands of years and governments have done nothing about it. You know, they hide behind the freedom of religion. But it's not religion. That, again, is part of the con. So yeah, you getting angry plays into their game, because then you look like the devil, and then the person looks at you. Do they choose between you getting very angry or the friendly cult that loves them? You know, oh, we love you. Oh, see, these people used to know. Now you're seeing the devil in them. You know, the agent provocateur kind of thing. And they provoke it. They provoke people to anger by saying they're the one true church, there's nowhere else to be saved. So not only do they provoke the anger and the rage and then use that rage to make you look like the bad guy, it's layer upon layer of trickery. You know, I mean, my experience is ICOC, ICC and RCW, you know, the Kit McKean cults. I never met anybody from RCW, but it's a photocopy of ICC kind of thing. So don't expect cult leaders to be honest or tell you how much money they're earning or defend their cover-ups. It's very naive to expect that. So the goal, I would say, is just exposing how the con works.